Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, right. Okay, guys, am I on share screen? You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. We're just trying to turn on the monitor, 1 sec. There it is. Okay. Okay, so the next portion of our program is well, I titled it The Fall of the Jiva, but for some people, it's our constitutional position or the origin of the soul. They call it different things. So how many of you in Zoom land and in person have heard someone say that we didn't come from the spiritual world?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Never heard that.
I've never heard that before.
we're about to hear. Who else? Anybody else in Zoom land?
What was the question, sorry?
Have you ever heard anyone tell you that we didn't come from the spiritual world?
I've seen Muslim friends saying this.
No, in
Yes.
ISKCON.
They're on the Christian.
Have you heard any in ISKCON?
No.
No, okay,
You will.
you will, you will eventually, yeah. Anyone else
Yeah,
out there?
I haven't heard anyone directly saying that, but I've heard a lot of discussion around that subject.
Okay. Okay. All right, so, we're just gonna go through it, what the claim is, and then what our rebuttal is, or what Prabhupada taught. Well, our rebuttal is based on what Prabhupada taught. Okay, what they claim, we were never in the spiritual world with Krishna. That's their claim. And then there's different varieties of it. It's changed over the decades. We've heard very many different things, and I've heard many varieties of it. I've had long conversations with people who have heard different varieties of it, and it kind of morphs on a regular basis. So they say we came from the Brahmajyoti, and some say from the Tatashta Shakti, or the Tatashta Lakshana. They say you cannot choose to turn away from Krishna if you are pure and live in a pure realm. And they say bhakti is not inherent to the soul. So those are some of the basic claims, and it's going to morph more over the years, and you're going to hear even new varieties of it. Arjuna already has a question, and we've just begun. Yeah, go ahead. Did you hear a different
So
variety?
It's like, we were talking about other groups that are like not in ISKCON and like not accepted. Is this something that's accepted?
They're like peppered through ISKCON.
Is
the
this something
official-
Prabhupada didn't-
Right, well, we're gonna go through that. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. They're peppered throughout ISKCON, so there are ISKCON devotees. I think there may be other groups too, outside of ISKCON, but there are ISKCON devotees who are preaching it and teaching it and discussing it and debating it. So it's good to know that it's out there. It surfaced in the early 90s was the first time I saw it, and then it disappeared for a while. It was just like, yeah, that's not true, and then it disappeared. And then I had a discussion with a devotee about it, and he said, well, it's not really any point discussing it. No one claims it anymore. And sure enough, within the year, it came back full force. So it's back again, and people are getting confused and bewildered by it and having some maybe crisis of faith. So I wanted to go over it with all of you, just rationally and through Prabhupada's teachings.
So this is opposing.
Yeah. To see, because I always start off with what they claim. What they claim is usually not what we
And
claim.
they is people who
Whoever
believe this
claims
idea.
it. Yeah. What they claim. Now, there are some people, and I've actually spoken to people who are like, I really want to believe we came from the spiritual world, but they have really good arguments, and I don't know what to think anymore. So it's not even just people who adamantly believe it. There are people who are just genuinely bewildered, and they hear what sounds to them like a good argument, and it just confuses them. And so we have these talks about it, and And I'll tell you why it is appealing to people. I'll tell you why it becomes appealing. All right, so Brihat Mridanga raised his hand and go back one slide. So we're not reading it while Brihat's talking.
I would agree with the last point, actually.
Oh, I spelled
Bucket.
his pocket.
Bucket is not inherent to the soul.
Huh?
Bucket is when bucket isn't.
Did I ever tell you I was dyslexic? Bucket. Kick the bucket is not inherent to the soul.
Yeah, that's not apparent. It's not natural for us to keep going. We're eternal.
Haribo. You know what? I saw that and I was like, I gotta go back and fix it. And then I forgot. It's due to my forgetfulness as a soul. All right, so
I thought, oh no, we have to finish.
he's like, I'm out of here. All right, so what this means, so here's a few things that to me off the top of my head, what it means if we believe these claims. If we didn't come in the spiritual world, we just were put here, it means we don't really have any free will. If bhakti's not inherent and we didn't have a choice, like we have no choice, right? We have no free will. Krishna just set us up for failure. We're not responsible for our actions, right? Because if we didn't choose to leave Krishna, it means we're not responsible for choosing to leave Krishna. And so what does that mean? That means it's Krishna's fault, right? He's the one that decided that we should be here and it's his fault that I'm here. It's not my fault. Nothing's ever my fault. I don't have to be humble. I don't have to be remorseful. I just have to blame Krishna and then get on with my bhakti to Krishna. What?
So we're kind of like explaining at the same, so I don't really fully grasp the original statement. So like, we were always in the Brahmajyoti.
They say we came from there.
We came from, like, we originated.
Like we
there,
started there.
And then,
Like we're little particles of light that just kind of like sparked down to the material world somehow.
Yeah. We'll go over it.
So that I'm still a novice, but I read his booklets, especially on like birth and rebirth, like when it's part of.
Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
It's silly.
So we'll go over these. So it means Krishna is whimsical and unjust, right? Because like, why would he throw some souls into the material world and the rest, they get to party with him? Krishna sets us up for failure. Prabhupada says over and over again that we're going to talk about this, some quotes about this, that if you are in the Brahmajyoti, you will fall down because there's no Ananda there, right? There's Sat, Chit, no Ananda. And we are Satchit Ananda. So why would Krishna put us somewhere where there's no Ananda? That would mean Krishna is impersonal, but we know Krishna is, what is it, Rasa Vaisa? He is Rasa. That means he is relationships. That means the souls have relationships with him. And then we don't feel the remorse required to repair the broken relationship, right? If you abandon a spouse or something, and then you try to come back to them later and you say to them, yeah, well, you kicked me out of the house, but I'm back. No, I didn't kick me out. Oh, you didn't kick you out. You left me. No, you kicked me out. And so, will that relationship be able to be repaired?
No.
Probably not, because they're going to see you as being insincere. They're going to see you as not taking accountability. You don't see the relationship as very important enough to be honest about what you did. And so that's why I think it's appealing to people, is that they don't have to be held accountable for their actions, right? They don't have to say, I couldn't possibly turn away from Krishna. Of course you could. It's called free will. So one thing is that Nandanandana Maharaj gives the example of going to a restaurant and there's only one item on the menu. Are you actually choosing that item? You don't really have a choice, right? That's all there is to eat. If you're hungry, that's all there is to eat. So whether you like it or not, you're stuck eating this meal, and you may be eating it thinking, I wish I had something else, may not be a good dish. So there has to be more than one choice. To choose Krishna means there has to be more than one choice. How could you choose him if there's no other choice? That's called free will. It means you can choose to try to be the Lord, or you can choose to serve the Lord. Those are the choices that you have. You raised your hand and then your eye twitched.
Yeah, I just want to add to the list here.
Yeah.
That another thing that this means is that basically we have no identity.
Mm,
We're basically nobodies, because
blank slate.
Yeah, because like now our experience is who we are is like false ego, you know, it's body and mind conditioning and things. So bhakti like purifies us from that. But then
Right.
if we don't have any eternal identity, if we don't have an eternal relationship with Krishna, if bhakti is not inherent in the soul, then when all the gunk is gone, when all the conditioning is gone, we're basically there's nothing
Right.
there,
Right.
and then we're just it's impersonal, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
It's basically like covered in personalism.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I would add on to that, I would dare say it nullifies the Bhagavad Gita as it is.
It nullifies all of
Yeah.
Prabhupada's books.
Because
Yeah.
it's never was their time, and I did not exist.
Nor you, nor all these kings, or any, yeah.
Yeah, it just nullifies everything in the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's.
We're gonna,
strange.
we're gonna see where it all began. Okay, so in response to their claim, oh, you had a question?
I guess it's
Let's go
like,
backwards.
like, do people actually, how are people able to like fall into this or like believe this?
We're gonna go over it. Cause you'll see is what happens usually. When people are very intellectual and they love to analyze everything to death. They'll pick one word, just one Sanskrit word, and they'll pull apart that word and they'll look at it and they'll be like, it says this one word in Nadi, it's speaking, you know. And so they just pull it apart and they, what is that? We don't see the forest for the tree. What is that expression?
Oh, you
We
don't
don't
see
see
the forest.
for the trees, yeah. So they don't see the bigger picture. They're just focused on this one little thing and then they build a philosophy around it. Plus, like I said, it's very appealing to the mind that I don't have to take accountability. Okay, so in response to their claim, Srila Prabhupada calls magazine back to Godhead, back, you go back. You don't go. He didn't call it to Godhead. He called it back to Godhead. And constantly, I mean, if you look up returning back home, back to Godhead, if you look that up in the database, it'll be endless pages of references. Return back home, back to Godhead, return home, return to God, you know. He also states that without free will, there's no question of devotion. So we talked about that we'll go into that a little bit too. And that this claim about we come from the Tatashta, oh, look it, I did it again. I can't believe it.
Bucket to shuck it.
Shut it in the bucket.
Second in the- All right, that says Shakti. I just want everybody to know that. Just bear with me. I always write things backwards. Tatashta Shakti is an ontological category. It's not a geographical location. So ontology deals with the nature of being, like the nature of existence. And so it's what are we? We are Tatashta Shakti. It's not a place. It's what we are composed of. It's what we are. And we'll talk about Tatashta Shakti and Lakshana. Lakshana just means the characteristic of. Shakti means energy. So we are the Tatashta energy of Krishna. And we have the characteristic, the Lakshana of Tatashta. And Tatashta, we're gonna go through that later. I don't want to. What? Ontological is the nature of existence, the nature of being, like with, like Jiva Tattva, Krishna Tattva, it's ontology. Okay, so yeah, so some people say we come from there, but it's not a location. So that's already is like, just brush that off the table. It's not a location. Okay, so here's some references. I'm gonna read a few of them. I have tons of them, but I don't think we should spend too much time reading all of the references because you literally just have to look it up and you'll come across it. But this is the Puranjana story in the 4th canto. And what happens is Puranjana, without going through the whole story, he's a king and he comes back in his next life as a woman. And then as a woman, he's married to a king, I believe, or she's married to a king. Then they retire to the forest. Husband goes into meditation, leaves his body. She's left behind. And she's grieving piteously. And Krishna comes in the form of a Brahmin, and this is what he's telling her. So the Brahmin continued, "My dear friend, even though you cannot immediately recognize me, can't you remember that in the past you had a very intimate friend? Unfortunately, you gave up my company and accepted a position as enjoyer of this material world. So Prabhupada says, when the living entity desires to enjoy themselves, they develop a consciousness of duality and come to hate the service of the Lord. It's a strong statement. In this way, the living entities fall into the material world. The natural position of the living entity is to serve the Lord in a transcendental loving attitude, right? Or a rasa. So we can see bhakti is inherent. This is our natural position. When the living entity wants to become Krishna himself or imitate Krishna, he falls down into the material world. How many times does Prabhupada have to say it? He falls down into the material world. And then he says it again, when the living entity falls down into the material world, the Supreme Lord, through his Swangsha expansion, Paramatma, keeps company with the living entity. In this way, the living entity may someday return home back to Godhead. By misusing his independence, the living entity falls down from the service of the Lord and takes a position in the material world as an enjoyer. That is to say, the living entity takes his position within a material body. And so I have many quotes like this, and you can find many more if you just do the research. I'm going to go through a few more of them, but you know, if Krishna is rasa, rasa means relationship, how Krishna relates with his devotees. And so Prabhupada says that he's the what does he say, the fountainhead, or he uses another word. He's the fountainhead of rasa, of transcendental exchanges. So if that's the case, why would he put someone in a place where there's no exchange of rasa? Why would he start us there? Not only that, but you can't start anywhere if you're eternal. Eternal means no beginning, no end. It doesn't mean you started somewhere and went for a really, 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 really long time. It just means no beginning, no end. So you don't start somewhere. You live eternally in the spiritual world, and you have a brief moment of experience of trying to enjoy. And then you're just back to your service. So sometimes people impose material time on the spiritual world. And so they'll say things like, let them go. Because I don't want people walking through the middle of it. They'll go around to the other door. And so it's not like, okay, so Krishna, we were born, then Krishna started us here where he knew we would fail, and then we felt here, and then we went there, and then it's just, you'll see some of the quotes from Prabhupada that it's literally just an experience of consciousness. And Prabhupada said, it's not even a matter of location. It's a matter of consciousness. Okay, so this is talking about the marginal energy. The living entities who are residents of the spiritual as well as the material expansions are as marginal energy. So there it is, Tatashta Shakti. And they're at liberty to live in either of the energies, external or internal. So he's saying they're at liberty, right? This is right here, Prabhupada's saying they have a choice to live in either of the energies, internal or external, meaning spiritual or material. So again, 2750 is talking about the prison house as a necessary institution for those who are disobedient. And he said, similarly, this material world is a temporary creation of the Lord for those who have forgotten him. So he's saying that Krishna has created this world for those who have forgotten him. But he's anxious to get the fallen souls back home, back to God. Prabhupada's directly saying this. He's anxious to get them back. And he gives so many chances via authoritative scriptures, his representatives and personal incarnations also. I've got a few more here. I guess I won't read all of them, but you can kind of take a quick look, reestablish eternal relations with him. Every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa. So there we're back to the rasa point. And he says that the impersonal Brahman effulgence of the Lord is not at all congenial to the living sparks, parts and parcels of the Lord. Therefore, the impersonalists again fall down and get material forms. Yeah, and then they go back to their original nature eventually. And in the mature stage, the developed transcendental feeling culminates in realization of the particular relationship with the Lord by which a living entity is originally constituted. So again, constantly everywhere in Prabhupada's books, you see that him talking about the original constitutional nature of the soul and reestablishing our relationship that we had with Krishna. The original home of the living entity is the spiritual world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We live together there peacefully with a blissful life because we are engaged in service of the Lord. However, when the living entity wants to enjoy himself, he falls down into the material world. And then we have this verse about being repentant. This is Bhagavatam 3:31-13. And I'm pretty sure those numbers aren't dyslexically written. I'm pretty sure it really is 3:31-13, but you can look it up. He is in the heart of every living entity, but he can be realized only by a soul who is repentant. He can be realized only by a soul who is repentant. The individual soul becomes repentant that he forgot his constitutional position, wanted to become one with the Supreme Soul, and tried his best to lord it over material nature. He has been baffled and therefore he is repentant. At that time, supersoul, or the relationship between the supersoul and the individual soul, is realized. So you can see that this repentance is required. And if you did not, if you didn't think that you could turn away from Krishna, how can you possibly be repentant? And if you can't be repentant, Prabhupada's saying this is the only way he can be realized, is that repentance. So we have to have some remorse that we turned away from Krishna, and to approach Krishna in that mood that I'm sorry I turned away from you and I want to fix this relationship that I broke. We don't want to blame Jiva. We don't want to blame, I'm looking at this huge word Jiva on here. We don't want to blame Krishna. That's very petty to blame Krishna for our own silly mistakes. And it's like switching the categories. It's basically saying we are perfect souls who never make mistakes, and Krishna is not a perfect soul who makes mistakes. It's like we've got the categories mixed up. We mixed up Jiva Tattva with Vishnu Tattva. And so we don't want to mix up those categories. If you mix those up, you get it all wrong. So Krishna's not the one who makes mistakes, we are.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said that they blame Krishna for our falling down and then they go to their bhakti to Krishna. I was thinking, why would someone do bhakti to Krishna?
Right.
They thought that Krishna just,
Threw them down here. Yeah,
not that threw them down, but started them off here. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
set them up for failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's a very discrimination with Christians.
Hmm.
Like, you may have heard this about
You're born a sinner kind of thing.
well, not just you're born a sinner, but God's ordained for everyone. Even though free will, unfortunately not, God's ordained for
Kind of
everyone.
like the default destination.
Yeah, even as no matter how much you try, no matter how much you pray, no matter how much you think, yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry, I've already.
So, yeah, so what
I
about,
don't like. Huh? Yeah, you can't, you're literally, no.
no, because once you're there too, it's game over.
Yeah, as soon as you're born, God's already done it. That, and when I hear this,
It sounds very similar.
Thing that I'm from sleep.
Left.
I like the idea that Krishna is called forgiving. You are going to be punished, but it's not going to be forever. Because the only forever is being with him. I like that.
Yeah, it's all rehabilitation
Yeah.
to get us back. So there's some more quotes here. I don't want to read all of them, but you can see there's so many more and I could give you these later. There's one here at the bottom, 3:16:35. Here is clear proof how a living entity coming originally from Vaikuntha Loka is encaged in material elements. So you can read that verse and that purport, but I just want to kind of extract how Prabhupada's always saying this. We came from there, we came here, here's the reason why we came here. And so for some people, they may find Prabhupada's books repetitive, but we're very thankful that it's repetitive because there's no question what he's saying. It's not a one-off thing. Prabhupada once said we came from Vaikuntha and then he never spoke about it again. You know, it's not like that. He repeats for a reason. So to see this repeated over and over again and then to make the claim to the opposite is to not be paying attention or not wanting to be paying attention.
The Goloka is like one of the Vaikuntha lokas.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's not contradictory.
Oh, yeah, no, it's part of the Vaikuntha realm. Yeah, Vaikuntha planets. Okay, so the Brahma Jyoti, it says my internet connection is unstable, and that's right before the whole thing goes down, and then we have to start it
No,
all.
it's okay, it offers that.
Okay.
It's fine. You might just come out like.
Like, da, 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 da. So this claim about falling from the Brahma Jyoti, someone, it looks like, had asked Prabhupada about it, and he wrote them a letter, and this is very interesting. The next question about the living entities falling down in this material world are not from the impersonal Brahman. Bam, right off the start. Existence in the impersonal Brahma is also within the category of non-Krishna consciousness. Those who are in the Brahman effulgence, they are also in the fallen condition. So there is no question of falling down from a fallen condition. When fall takes place, it means falling down from the non-fallen condition. And the non-fallen condition is Krishna consciousness. So long one can maintain pure Krishna consciousness, he is not falling down. As soon as he becomes out of Krishna consciousness, immediately he is falling down. It does not matter where a living entity stays. In the material world also, there are different stages of living conditions, and to remain in the Brahman effulgence is also another phase of that fallen condition. Just like in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that conditioned souls, by their pious activities, are elevated to the higher planetary system, but as soon as the stock of pious activities is finished, he again comes down to the earthly planet. Similarly, those who are elevated beyond the planetary system to the Brahma effulgence, they are also prone to fall down as much as a living entity from the higher planetary system. So this means it's just, the Brahma Jyoti is part of, it's Krishna's effulgence, but he says it's part of non-Krishna consciousness. So he's giving the example, just like people go to higher planets, run out of pious activities, fall, but they're just kind of bouncing around in this non-conscious realm, non-Krishna conscious realm. And so that's just part of it. So it's not a question of, well, that's where we began, that's where we were born, that's where we were first put. It's just when we decide to enjoy separately from Krishna, we come to this realm. And in this realm, we bounce around until we finally get back to the spiritual world. So, and then, of course, I put starting quotations because we are eternal. We don't start anywhere and we don't end anywhere. We just exist, and we exist in relation to Krishna. So this is a lecture in Bombay. I put the reference here on Bhagavatam 3:25-17. So he's explaining why we don't stay in the Brahma Jyoti. Because we are after Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda, simply to rise to the platform of Brahman, that is Sat, partial realization of the absolute truth, Sat. Then Chit, Chit means knowledge, that is also partial. Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda, when there Ananda you cannot get, just like if you simply in the sky you fly, you don't get Ananda. So he's saying there's no Ananda in the Brahma Jyoti. Therefore, you have to come down again to the airport. So he's saying you can't just circle around in the sky forever. You got to land in the airport eventually. Without that, there is no Ananda. Similarly, simply rising up to the Brahman effulgence, there is no Ananda. So there may be Sat and Chit, there may be eternity, but there's no Ananda. And Ananda the bliss comes from the rasa with Krishna. Ananda means you have to enter into the spiritual planet where Narayan, Krishna, is there. Parastasmat tubabo nyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana. Bhagavad Gita 8:20. You have entered to that eternal planet. You must get some residence. The impersonalists, they do not get that. They remain just like you remain in the sky. You cannot be happy. You want some planet. But if you cannot get planet, then you come back in this planet. So then he quotes from the Bhagavatam, again in this material world. So he's saying that that can't be a place where souls are put by Krishna, because it doesn't satisfy their constitutional position. So again, for Krishna to put us somewhere himself without our choosing it, that doesn't satisfy the condition of the living entity would just be cruel. Why would you do that? It's like having kids and then knowing they need to eat and never feeding them. You know, you give them a hug every once in a while, but you don't feed them. You know, why would you do that? You know, you have to feed them, you have to care for them, you have to discipline them, you have to do all of the things as part of the relationship. And so why would Krishna say, I know that you need Ananda and that you are composed of a relationship with me, but I'm going to put you somewhere where that doesn't exist. Let's see how you do. And then you don't do well, oh, well, that's your problem. you
Then it
know?
gets worse, then you go to the material world.
Yeah, and it
Like,
even
you
gets
don't get
worse.
no bliss, and go to the material world and suffer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Actually, I think it's gonna.
Okay, let's see what the next slide is. All right, wait, before I go to the next slide, does anyone have any realizations, points, questions, comments in Zoom land?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, just 2 days ago, no, it was yesterday, we had Srimad Bhagavatam class here, and I asked this question to the speaker, but I was not convinced with the answer. So it's, I might have to, okay. So Ajay, Vijay, they were, can you hear me? Or
Oh,
am I
yeah.
frozen?
We're gonna, I can hear you. Can you hear
Hare
me?
Krishna.
Oh, maybe we have a bad connection. Does anyone else, does everyone else hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Vatala, are you still there?
You're muted, Vatsala.
Yes, I was,
Ah.
yeah, sorry,
Can
I'm
you hear
having,
me?
yes, I can hear you. I'm
Okay.
having
We're gonna
Wi-Fi.
we're gonna go over the Jai and Vijay story.
Yes. So, Jay and Vijay, we're reading third canto here, right?
Yep.
So Jay and Vijay, they were outside Vaikuntha, like they were the doorkeepers of Vaikuntha.
Yes,
They're the devotees of the Lord.
right.
Somehow, like they were cursed, and then they fell down. And I was told by one of the speakers that this was an arrangement of the Lord. This is his Leela. So it's just like Krishna wanted to this, so that's why it happened. Otherwise, no devotee who has gone back to Krishna will ever fall down. And then
Yeah.
they chose 3 birds as demons rather than taking 7 birds as devotees. And even like so they chose 3 birds as demon so that they could come back to Godhead as soon as possible.
Yes.
But they did not come back to Godhead after those 3 birds. They were merged. They were resting in Brahmajyoti. So what do you have to say about this? I mean,
Do you remember that part that they came back to the Brahmajyoti? What verse explains
well,
that?
I think I have it. I don't remember what was the verse that he was trying to quote. He was talking about liberation, and I think I have read it in Krishna book somewhere. I don't know which chapter is it, but like basically it was like if you are meditating upon Krishna unfavorably, you do get certain kind of liberation, like Kansa and
Oh, that might have been between
or
births. That
Hiranyakashipu,
might have
but
been
you
between
may
the,
or may not come back to Godhead. Oh,
can you hear me?
can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yeah, can you hear
Sorry,
me?
my Wi-Fi. Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, that might have been between births.
I
last
see.
one they went back to
Yeah,
God.
the last one they went back, but maybe in between the other 2 births, maybe they just kind of hung out in the Brahmajyoti till it was time for the next one.
Okay.
I would imagine that's it.
It wasn't until they were like Shishupal and Dr. Bakra that they actually went back to, that they came back just for fun.
I see. Okay. Now it makes sense.
Okay,
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
okay, so here's
I don't know
another,
if you heard my thank you. My Wi-Fi
Yes.
is very unstable.
I did. Another thing people say is that there's this talk about a Nitya Mukta and the Nitya Baddha, right? Those who are eternally conditioned and those who are eternally liberated. So sometimes there's a separation maybe between those two, that there's 2 different kinds of jivas. ones that are eternally liberated and ones that don't have a choice. Or the other way around, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. It's like those that are, yeah, eternally conditioned, and then those who are eternally liberated don't have a choice.
Well, neither
I've
has a
seen,
choice.
I've seen that claiming. They both have a choice.
And that's what I'm saying, that according to the claim is that,
No, the claim is that I read is that the eternally liberated souls don't have a choice. They're there in Krishna Loka because they don't have a choice. It's like was directly stated. I read it on, I read a transcript of a lecture, yeah.
It's very expensive.
I don't wanna, unless somebody transcribed the lecture wrong, but they were still promoting it. And that those in the, those that are eternally liberated do have a choice. Which, yeah, it's, and so it was saying that those who, how was it worded? Something to the effect of, that they come from the Tatashta, the ones in the Tatashta region, which isn't a region, have a choice. But they maybe chose to come here, and then those that are eternally liberated, they don't have a choice. They're not in that region. So Tatashta again means marginal. Yeah, it's very confusing. When you hear the philosophy that we didn't come from the spiritual world and they start to explain it, it's super confusing. And when you hear Prabhupada's explanation, it's like, oh, yep,
That
okay,
makes sense.
next, you know, it's like so
and you
simple.
also feel it. It's not
Yeah,
just that you
yeah.
get it, but you like,
Yeah, you don't have to rack your brain to make sense of it. But this is like, I can see everyone's face as soon as I say this. It's like, what? You know, how it's like, it's so incomprehensible, not just mystically incomprehensible, it just doesn't make sense.
It sounds like an academic piece of work. I like, if you know what I mean, like, there's certain academics that they go far too long in their studies. And write
Yeah.
too much to the point where they have some weird.
Yeah,
strange
right,
form-
Yeah.
stuff.
right. Okay, so, Ravinus Prabhu wrote a paper about, and I could also share this paper with everybody, about how time works in the material world as opposed to the absence of time in the spiritual world. And so he was saying that, these things could be true in this sense. If you're in the material world, you're always conditioned. That's why you're here. If you're in the spiritual world, you're never conditioned. That's why you're there. So while you're here, you're always conditioned. And when you go back to the spiritual world, you're never conditioned. So that's how he reconciles it, which is true. And he also said that oftentimes it's used as a figure of speech because Prabhupada said that we can't trace back how many millions of lifetimes we've been here. They use the word eternal because it's in this since time immemorial. That's what Prabhupada says. You hear him say constantly, since time immemorial. That means you just can't remember when it started. So it seems eternal. But it's true. If you're here, it means you're conditioned always. Nitya always also means always, right? And if you're in the spiritual world, you're never conditioned. Okay, the story that started it all. This is where it all sprung from. This is the beginning of time, eternal time. Okay, so this is where it comes from, and this is where the confusion come from. And this purport 7:135. Therefore, it is to be understood that when Jai and Vijay descended to this material world, they came because there was something to be done for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Otherwise, it is a fact that no one falls from Vaikuntha. So this is how it all kind of began. So, and this goes back to the hermeneutical principle that you don't just take one statement out of all the books and use it as a philosophy, right? You have to see how this works with all of Prabhupada's other statements, Bhaktisiddhanta's statements, you know, the previous acharyas, like how does it work together? What does it mean? How do we understand this story? So if you go to verse 34 of that chapter and that canto, the question that Yudhishthira is actually asking is, how can someone who's a faithful servant of Krishna be forced out of the spiritual world by someone else? So he said, it's not a, I'm sorry, I'm saying he said, it name's saying him. I had posed this question to Krida and Maharaj, and he said that it's not a question of whether or not someone falls. it's a question of, or how they fall, it's a question of how can you be forced when you are faithfully serving the Lord? How could you be forced out of the spiritual world? And this goes to Vatsala's question. What Prabhupada states, well, actually, you had already asked the whole question about the Brahmajyoti, but also, what you were saying before is that Krishna had Prabhupada explains that Krishna had a desire to fight. But since everyone's a faithful servant in the spiritual world, no one's going to fight him.
Well,
So he has to come to the material world to fight. And so Jai and Vijay took up that service to come as demons to fight Krishna. That's why they came to the material world. The curse was arranged. It was because the four Kumaras who had cursed Jai and Vijay, they apologized immediately. I don't know what came over us. I don't know why we did this. And Krishna said, well, it's my arrangement because we're going to go and have some pastimes. And then they're going to have like the 3 lives, as they said. And like Prabhupada Priya said, they come back later as, I have Jai and Vijay stuck in my head. And Lord Chaitanya's Jagaya Madai. They come back again to be part of the pastimes. So they weren't forced out by a curse. It was ordained by Krishna that they come and have these pastimes with Krishna in the material world. So if you are faithfully serving, so again, that goes back to that point of you don't get forced out of the spiritual world. You choose to leave the spiritual world. That's why you just asked that question. I can't believe someone could be forced. If you're there and you're faithful, how can you have trust that you won't be thrown somewhere? But they had, they went to take on that service of engaging in those pastimes and then come right back. It wasn't that Jai and Vijay wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna, or that they wanted to be the Lord of everything, or they wanted to be the center. And it's not that while they were faithfully serving Krishna, devotees randomly came along and were like, you have to get out of here. I curse you to get out of here. So that's not possible. That's the question being asked. And so that's what Prabhupada is explaining here, is that there was a reason for this pastime. Otherwise, they wouldn't just fall. And so that's the context in which Prabhupada is explaining that. Sapa.
If everybody in Vaikuntha is a faithful servant, how come there's not even like one Kshatriya who's willing to fight Krishna just for the sake of Krishna's enjoyment? Like, why do they have to go to the material world because somebody's willing to fight him?
Well, there's the reason for Kshatriyas and Kshatriya's existence is to deal with people who don't follow the laws. There's no one like that in the spiritual world. So there doesn't have to be Kshatriya. No Kshatriyas. There doesn't need to be. Yeah, there's no Varnashram. It's not like people there doesn't need to be law and governance. Everyone's independent because they don't misbehave.
Oh.
So in Satya Yuga, there was no Varnashram, right? There was just Brahmins. They were just people who meditated. And no one bothered each other. So what's the need of administration? What's the need of police? What's the need of, warriors? There's no need for it. It wasn't until the anarthas started creeping in and people started misbehaving that they started to have governance.
But still, wouldn't somebody fight Krishna just because that's like what Krishna wants?
Yeah, in the material world.
it did.
The five boys wrestle with them, but it's not the same.
It's not the
like-
same, yeah.
It wasn't like someone really wants to kill you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
bad.
Yeah, it wasn't like play fighting. It was like to the death, and you can't die in the spiritual world. And it just doesn't work there. Krishna knows what's up. So that's what's being discussed in that story, but it was taken out of context and misunderstood. There was something else I was gonna say based on a question someone asked. I can't remember.
I like your explanation. I never heard it explained like that before. It makes it very clear, right? So what it's saying here is that Prabhupada says, otherwise it's a fact that no one falls from like it's kind of like in the context of the question. That's why
Yeah.
this is so important. Look at the whole
Yeah, yeah.
context. Is that the question is, like, how is it that someone who's actually a pure soul, who's actually serving with
Right.
devotion, how can that person
Be forced out of the
be-
spiritual
be
world.
forced out? Yeah, so then he's saying, no, that doesn't happen.
right,
This was an
exactly,
exception,
exactly.
because this was a pastime, they had something to be done. It
Right.
went as a service, actually.
Yeah. So that never happens. That's what he's saying.
Otherwise, it's hard to know how to respond to this sentence here. Like, they're-
Right, right. Yeah. And I'm gonna give Prabhupada's explanation of this verse because it was asked in a class. So I don't know if that'll answer the question you're about to ask, or you have a different one.
Right.
Okay, I'm trying to go to that also. Let me just bring it up on my phone because I can't look it up while I'm sharing the screen. So Srila Prabhupada's answer about the Jai and Vijay confusion, this is in Tokyo, Srimad Bhagavatam 291. So the answer is when somebody asks you that when one has become in contact with this material nature, he has not become in contact. He is thinking by the influence of the external energy. Just like the same example, a man is dreaming. There is no contact with tiger. Actually, he has no contact with that. Similarly, actually, we are not fallen. We cannot be fallen, but we have created a situation that we are become. Try to understand this point. It is a very important point. We have simply created a situation. And then he says, actually, we have not created a situation. Krishna has given us a situation. Because we wanted to imitate Krishna, so Krishna has given an opportunity. All right, imitate. You want to be imitation king in the stage? So feel like this, play like this, do like this. People will applaud. Oh, a very nice king, very nice. So that is the, so this situation, our contact with matter is just like a dream. Actually, we are not fallen. Therefore, because we are not fallen, at any moment we can revive our Krishna consciousness. This is my favorite line of the whole explanation. Because we are not fallen, at any moment we can revive our Krishna consciousness. As soon as we understand that I have nothing to do with, I am simply Krishna's servant, eternal servant, that's all. Immediately he becomes liberated. Exactly like that. As soon as you, sometimes we do that. When the fearful dreaming becomes too much, intolerable, we break the dream. We break the dream, otherwise it becomes intolerable. Similarly, we can break this material connection at any moment, as soon as we come to the point of Krishna conscious. Oh, Krishna is my eternal master. I am his servant. That's all. This is the way. Actually, we are not fallen. There cannot be any fallen. The same example, actually, there is tiger, it is dreaming. Similarly, our fallen condition is also dreaming. We are not fallen. See how Prabhupada repeats things over and over and over again. Get the point, get the point. I'm not saying anything different. We are not fallen. We can simply give up that illusory condition at any moment, at any moment. So if you study all these verses very nicely, you will get this knowledge quickly. So it also answers that question when he says no one falls from Vaikuntha. Jai and Vijay did not go into the fallen state of consciousness. That's so when he says that they're not falling from Vaikuntha, they didn't go into the fallen state of consciousness. So we don't actually fall, we just go into a fallen state of consciousness. That's Prabhupada's point.
So it's interesting because the fact is that, because the first point you were making was that, yeah, we do fall down from the spiritual world, but at the same time, we don't actually fall because our fallen situation is an illusion.
Yeah,
It's actually a dream.
it's a dream and
We
it's,
need to wake up.
yeah,
As
and
soon
it's
as we
our
wake up,
consciousness.
conscious, then we'll realize that actually we were never fallen. we were just
Right.
dreaming.
Right, exactly.
So, this is like social stuff.
Mhm.
So every time we talk about falling from the higher state, it's not like a physical fall. It's more of like a haziness in your consciousness.
Yeah,
Like for whatever reason why you started to have this like miss of your consciousness that's causing you to like forget yourself.
Yeah.
Forget yourself.
yeah, it's material, yep, material state of consciousness. And as we were saying before, there's no time in the spiritual world. It's not like, oh, he's been gone for a long time.
Right.
You know, it's not like, well, 2 days have gone by, we filed a missing persons report and we don't know when he's gonna come back. And then, it's not like that. It's that you exist in the spiritual world. And for a moment you have an experience. And that experience is so strong that you realize, oh, that's why Krishna's the center and I'm not. And that's why you never fall into that again. Because you had that strong enough experience that you really realize, oh, Krishna really is the qualified person for this position. And I have a loving relationship with him. And so it's very brief. So it's not like, well, at one time we were doing this service and then we left for a few years and then we came back and we picked up a different service. In fact, I've even heard a description given that, I don't remember where it was. You may know that, someone may go to the river to get some water for Krishna and they think for a moment, why is the water for Krishna? And then they have this experience and then they finish getting the water and go back. I've heard
Yeah, it's a whole
that.
story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Ooh,
So we're just like sitting, we're still in, like, just sitting there, like having, like, fainting for a moment.
just kind of like, what the hell?
I like that. Whoa.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I have said that, when someone becomes Nitya Siddha, when you think of whatever you want, they'll realize that they were never actually Nitya Bhajan.
mm,
It was just,
right.
it was just a dream. Like, I was never, you have all this whole experience in a dream and you wake up and just like, oh, actually that didn't happen.
You know, like, consciousness from.
But-
Yeah.
We can also
Guys, don't go there.
understand
Don't do it.
that.
Yeah, it did. You had that experience for sure. And it's not like Krishna's energy is an illusion. The illusion is you think it's separate from Krishna. It's not that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, Krishna's illusory energy is a real energy,
Yeah,
but the experience that you're having under the influence of that illusory energy is not real.
yeah. So if you see a flower and you think that flower is for me to enjoy, that's the illusion. If you see a flower and you think this is for Krishna to enjoy, you're not an illusion. The flower is actually there. It's just, what are you going to use it for? Your own sense gratification or for Krishna's sense gratification, spiritual sense gratification. That's why we make garlands. That's why two participants have their hands raised. All right, so let's,
That's how we wake up.
yeah, let's take a couple of, hold on, I got some people in Zoom land. I'll get back to you. Who's gonna be humble and let the other person go first? Then no one speaks.
Okay, I'm not humble. I'm asking my
Okay, good,
question.
good. Perfect,
Okay.
so nice, get the job done.
Okay, this is just a random question, but what if someone sees a flower and not necessarily thinks anything like it's for me or for like anybody? What if you're just seeing the flower and acknowledging the flower? What kind of state of mind is that?
Well, I don't know, you'd have to define, what does it mean to acknowledge it? Just that you passed by it and you just tried not to bump into it?
Or yeah, you just pass by a flower and you just see like, okay, this is a flower, but not necessarily for my enjoyment or enjoyment. I'm not even thinking of Krishna either, like for his enjoyment or for anyone else's enjoyment. I am just seeing the flower, like not thinking anything else. What's
Well,
that? Is that like impersonalism?
Yeah, I guess so. The mind is always active. If you're not seeing it as for Krishna, then it's not a Krishna conscious thought. Right? So you can walk around this world and it's kind of like when you get deities and you start making outfits for them or decorating the altar, you start seeing the whole world as
Yeah, that's true.
potential decorations for Krishna. That's all you see. And you go into a store and you see jewelry and you're like, oh, I can make a necklace for Krishna with that. Or, so you see the world very differently. And then you really see, yeah, this is all Krishna's energy. And same way with people. When you want to just enjoy somebody, you're seeing them as separate from Krishna. When you see them as servants of Krishna and you want to help them in their service, you're actually seeing things properly. I think someone's talking in the background.
Yeah, we're making some garlands, but
Okay.
actually, yeah, because I had this thought, I never used to look at flowers and think, well, one for my enjoyment or for Krishna's.
Right.
And so now I look in people's yards and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to offer these to Prabhupada or the deities. And
Right.
but it also compels me to almost want to go and take a flower from someone's yard, and that doesn't seem like it is right.
No, it's
when
not.
before I would have never even thought to do something like that. But
Right. You're right.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's everything belonging to Krishna doesn't mean that it's up for grabs for us to steal.
Yeah.
We can
Okay.
grow our own flowers, buy our own flowers.
True.
Stealing is not an appropriate way to behave.
Yeah.
Hare
Thank
Krishna,
you.
Okay, so mute yourself.
Nanda Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I had a question specifically about one of the primary arguments of
Yeah,
inherent,
yeah.
or what is it? I don't know,
Nothing
but
is not inherent, yeah.
essentially there seems to be, or they cite a big discrepancy between the position of the Goswamis, particularly Jiva Goswami, and the position of Bhaktivinoda Thakur onward. So it's from how they posit it, there's just overwhelming evidence that the Goswamis understood that that Jiva had never fallen, and that was their position. And then there was this shift for one reason or another post from Bhaktivinoda Thakur onward. So I'm wondering, how do we understand that or respond to that?
Okay, thanks for posing that question. Remember I was talking earlier about handing, oh, I don't know if you were there in the first, I can't see who's online, but in the first session, we were talking about the parampara and how the ripe mango has to be handed down carefully. So I feel like what a lot of people are doing is stepping on the head of Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur to try to reach Jiva Goswami, thinking that they can understand his teachings without understanding it through their current acharyas. So we accept Prabhupada as the current acharya and we understand the Goswamis through Prabhupada, through Bhaktisiddhanta. I actually had an experience where this was actually very interesting. I'm glad you brought up the point. Somebody sent me a quote from Bhaktisiddhanta that was supposed proof that we didn't come from the spiritual world. So I read the whole thing. I read it whole thing in context. And I was so excited to see that it was a very, very good detailed description of how we fell from the spiritual world. And yeah, and they had sent it as proof that we didn't. So I feel like when you really want to believe something, and what's so great about Prabhupada is like, it's really, really hard to say that Prabhupada said we didn't come from the, unless you take that one quote out of context, it's really hard to say that. So what people have started to do lately is go over Prabhupada. Or, and I'm going to go to this next, is that they make claims that the acharyas disagreed with one another. And so again, I was sent that quote as proof that they disagreed. Well, Prabhupada doesn't agree with Bhaktisiddhanta, and here's proof. And then you see, no, actually, and I'm going to show you soon that quote, actually. We're going to talk about it. We have time. We're going to talk about it. And I don't think that I would, personally, I wouldn't go so far back as Jiva Goswami without trying to understand through Prabhupada. And I think it's dangerous to do so. I think that's dropping the mango from the top of the tree, or even halfway down a sequoia tree. What are those? The redwood trees, which are gigantic. You go halfway up it and you drop the mango all the way down and hope someone catches it. And usually they don't. And then the mango gets smashed and you lose all the juice and the pulp. And Suppa's like, I would eat it anyways.
Yeah.
But you'd be eating a dirty mango. And so you get some philosophy, you got to brush the dirt off and try to like start again, you know? Does that answer your question for now? And Prabhupada Priya is going to say something too.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that's pretty thorough. I think, did you have something you wanted to add, Rasa?
Well, I guess like, yeah, we definitely understand that, you know, that Prabhupada was like an acharya and he was explaining things best suitable way for us. But since we already heard some other argument, like from someone else who like assumably went and read Goswami's scriptures or whatever, then like I have no like rational way to explain what they have read. So like how I was just wondering like why, like in what way Prabhupada would have explained this, you know? Like if there was a reason why he did that and I accept that, but like, you know, how?
Okay, we're
Okay.
gonna, a couple of things. One is, and then I'll let whatever you have. One is that, I know, for example, a person who doesn't believe in the Bhagavatam, but is studying the Tattva Sandarbhas, which established the Bhagavatam as the ultimate authority. And so how people can get bewildered is by false ego. And so they read these, get super intellectual and scholarly, and again, they don't see the forest for the trees. They just, it's actually almost comical. When I thought about it, when it hit me first, this person studying Tattva Sandarbhas, they don't believe in the Bhagavatam. It's like, it's almost comical. It's kind of farcical. And so for me personally, I don't try to, when we talk about these points, I'm not interested in debating with the people who are convinced of this. I'm more interested in teaching people who are bewildered and aren't sure. People who want to believe it will believe it no matter what you say. I had a conversation with someone once who believed it, and every time I made a point that was that he had no response to, that could have ended the discussion, he repeated something else he had said earlier in the conversation. And so I brought it back and I said, well, okay, we can go back to that, but what about what I just said? I kind of held him to it. And that's when our conversation ended. Oh, well, I guess we're just going to disagree. So it doesn't just goes in circles. It doesn't end with any kind of conclusion. And so I kind of use this information just to know that I'm convinced by Prabhupada and I want to help others to understand Prabhupada's teachings. I haven't read Jiva Goswami's teachings and I'm not going to attempt to. I'd rather, Prabhupada gave us everything we need to go back to Godhead. He says so in his books. He says in his books that his books have everything we need to go back to Godhead. So I would rather not make my life more confusing and start reading things that make me bewildered. And I'm not sure if Prabhupada's only claim to success was to follow the instructions of his spiritual master. And he did his Bhagavatam commentary with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. So he was following in disciplic succession. But I'm going to we're going to go into that soon. I have some quotes and then Prabhupada Priya has something also.
Yeah, I just want to make a general.
Yeah.
I just want to make a general comment about Jiva Goswami because for my Bhaktivedanta course, which is study of the Bhagavatam, we had to do a whole module on Tattva Sandarbha. So we read the whole Tattva Sandarbha, which is written by Jiva Goswami under the guidance of the teacher who is a big scholar in it. And Jiva Goswami doesn't say a single thing in Tattva Sandarbha that goes against Prabhupada. In fact, as I was reading it, it was just reinforcing everything that I learned from all Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And that one major point, the actual major point in the Tattva Sandarbha is to establish the pramana. The highest pramana is the highest authority for all philosophical discussions or points is the Srimad Bhagavatam. Like the whole first half of Tattva Sandarbha is called Pramana Khanda, and it's just he's like one verse after the other explaining why Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate highest authority on everything. And so Jiva Goswami is never going to contradict the Bhagavatam. So we don't need to read the writings of Jiva Goswami. We just need to read the Bhagavatam because basically Jiva Goswami's writing is to promote the Bhagavatam, and all the philosophical statements that he makes are based on the Bhagavatam because that's the highest authority. So then that's why Prabhupada gave us the Srimad Bhagavatam so that we would understand things properly from the highest authority. So yeah, the fact if there's some contradiction between Jiva Goswami and Bhagavatam, it's a misinterpretation.
Yeah.
Of Jiva Goswami.
That's why I mentioned the Bhakti Siddhanta quote because they thought that was proof that they disagreed. Sapa, and then we're going to go on to the next slide.
So going back to the idea of like flowering and bunting.
Yeah.
Relationally, how is that working if there are relationships in Golok and Vrindavan? Like, doesn't Nanda Maharaj don't they love each other if they're enjoying the relationship?
Yeah, you enjoy the relationship. You don't try to enjoy the person for your own gratification. In other words, he doesn't just see her as an object of his sense gratification. There is an exchange. There's an exchange of respect and love. In this world, love, what we call love, is actually lust. It means, yeah. The love is between Krishna and the souls, and then the souls have loving relationships with each other as servants of Krishna. And so we dovetail that lust into having a bona fide relationship, which is meant to help each other serve Krishna and get out of this bodily concept of life and go back to Godhead. We're supposed to see the other person as a servant of Krishna. What can I do to help them in their service? Help each other.
There can be there can be love between like pure souls
Yeah.
in this world also, but generally speaking, like that's what it is.
Right, right. Okay, so let's move on. The question, how can we fall if we are pure? So this is a purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam 291. Now, the next question automatically will be made, why the Lord influences the living entity to such consciousness and forgetfulness? The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in his pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as he is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to become so. So we're not qualified to be God. That's the problem. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to be like him. So you have to be put into illusion if you want to. Actually, he's doing us a favor. If you want to imitate me, the only way you could do that is to forget that you're my servant. So I have to delude you into thinking that actually you're not. I have to help you, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that the living entity is composed of faith, right? You have to have faith in something, and all of that faith comes from Krishna. So if your faith is atheism, your faith comes from Krishna to be an atheist. So he allows you to be an atheist, to have that faith that there's no God. Like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification, when the living entity desires to become the Lord himself, he is put in a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, the first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord, and the consequent will of the Lord is that the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of utopia where he may become one like the Lord. So he has to be put into a dream state because it's not his real state, but he desires to feel like he's the Lord. So he's put into that dream state in order to desire it.
And Krishna says it directly in the Bhagavad Gita, this one verse. Icha Dvesha Samudaya. Says that all living entities in this world are born into it's like bewildered by overcome by Icha, which means desire to become God, and Dvesha, which means hate. And in one verse, hate or envy of the person who is God, then they're born into this delusional
Right.
situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess like we're seeing like all these slides on like why it's wrong. And the only thing I've seen for like the fall of the Jew argument is just like that one sentence about Jai and Vijay. And I'm kind of like struggling to conceive like how, like I'm already convinced that he didn't fall, but I'm wondering what is like their perspective and why is it that people can believe this, and also what kind of people are they in India primarily or in the US primarily?
Yeah, they're all over, but there's a lot in the US.
We're important enough, not too much to the accounts. Anyone uses something a little bit, sometimes people want to take things out of context to do so.
Yeah, so we're gonna go over a few more things that might show, because I'm kind of going through their arguments. The people that I've spoken to, it's true, there's not much quoting of scripture. It's their theory. So there's not a lot.
Or it's just a bad spin on somebody else, like Diva Goswami, or like.
This is the rest of that purport. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We kind of get the picture. He's like saying a mother gives a child a mirror to like, if he wants the moon, he could use it to see the moon. But I want to move on because it's going to get late. Okay, so how can we fall if we are pure? Continued. In this purport in the Bhagavatam, I'm citing all my sources because you guys can go back and look all this up, and whoever wants this presentation, I could send it to you. So he says, without freedom, there is no execution of devotional service. So again, we have the free will, otherwise we couldn't perform devotional service, but that also means we can choose to turn away from Krishna. So this is a Bhagavad Gita class 1515 in New Mayapur, which is France. Srila Prabhupada, why God gave to man free will if he knew the man would fall down in the material world? Prabhupada, and we're going back to the stone again, Arjuna.
It's not, right.
No, listen, he doesn't say dead stone. If you have no free will, then you are a stone. So you're alive, but you're a stone. Because you don't move. The stone has no free will. You want to be stone, then you must have free will, but don't misuse your free will. But don't try to become stone. That is not life. So he's saying without free will, you don't have a choice. And then you're just a stone. You just sit there. You don't do anything. So we have to have that free will. You can't, it can't just be in name only. You have free will, but you kind of really don't, because you can never leave the spiritual world. You're trapped here. Free will means Krishna. So what are the 6 opulences of Krishna? One of them is full detachment, right? Krishna is detached. He's not attached to us liking him. He's not attached to us staying with him. So he gives us free will. If you want, you could be with me. And if you don't want, you don't have to be. So if you give someone free will, you have to accept that they may turn away from you, and give them that freedom. They may turn away from you, but he's always anxious to have us back. He knows what's best for us. It's not because he's needy. We are the minority here. We're like 1/4 of the spiritual world, even though it's unlimited. It's basically what Prabhupada said. Oh, Kaylee, your iPhone raised its hand, it says here. So you have to have this free will in order to make a choice, and Krishna is not needy and needs you to not make that choice, so keeps you there against your will. Okay, Kaylee.
Yeah, not sure how my phone did that. Didn't have a
Okay.
question.
Okay, see, it has a mind of its own, like a stone. Okay, how can we fall over pure? We're continuing this. This is a class in San Francisco. Bhakti Jana, how could we make a poor choice if we are part and parcel of Krishna? How could we have chosen the material world? Oh, because you've got independence. Don't you see so many students come, they go away again. Yesterday, Kirtanananda went to call Ranchor. He said, oh, I have forgotten this. So you can forget. There is another student. He was also our student, Wally. Oh, you can go immediately. Suppose if you, oh, I don't care for this Krishna consciousness society. Who calls you? You can go. That independence is there. We can misuse. Bhakti Jana, but Krishna will always be there if we want to go back. Prabhupada. Okay. Krishna is always prepared to accept you. He's always prepared. But because he has given us independence, we misuse it and we fall under the clutches of Maya. That is our misfortune. We create this misfortune and we can create our good fortune. Man is the architect of his own fortune. So if you become Krishna conscious, it is to your good fortune. If you become Maya conscious, it is to your bad fortune. You are the creator. Bhakti Jana, when the souls that were never conditioned at all, do they also have the independence? Yes, but they have not misused. They know that I am meant for Krishna's service and they are happy in Krishna's service. So now you can see that kind of eliminates that other argument that some souls have no choice.
Everyone has choice.
Everyone has a choice. When the souls that were never conditioned, they still have independence. They still have a choice. So now we see through Prabhupada's teachings that that's the case. There aren't 2 different groups of souls. Okay, so here's going back to the claim that Prabhupada disagreed with Bhaktisiddhanta. Prabhupada constantly claimed that the only reason why he was successful is because he followed his guru %. He was completely dedicated. I am successful only because I am following strictly the orders of my Guru Maharaj and I do not deviate. I do not think myself an authority. I am just to serve the order of my spiritual master. That's all. Just follow his order. Spiritual master is along with you by his words, just like my spiritual master is not physically present, but I am associating with him by his words. On the disappearance day of my Guru Maharaj, you may hold meeting to discuss his activities and offer respect to his memory. Practically, this movement is his because it is under his order that I have come to your country. So far, I am concerned I am conducted by the order of a superior authority and liberated person. My spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pad Sri Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj wanted it, and just trying to serve him without any personal whim. And then one more. Unfortunately, we do not wish to carry out the order of the acharyas. We manufacture our own ways. We have got practical experience how a great institution was lost by whimsical ways. Without carrying out the order of the spiritual master, they manufactured something and the whole thing was lost. Therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur stresses so very much on the words of the spiritual master. Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Kuru Nandana. 241. If you stick to the order of the spiritual master, then without caring for your own convenience or inconvenience, then you become perfect. So you can see the way Prabhupada speaks, there's no way Prabhupada disagreed with his spiritual master. It does not fit that speculation that, you know, sometimes they disagree and he disagreed with Bhakti Siddhanta is practically, actually, I would say is an insult to Prabhupada. Constantly he says that his fortune, his success is simply by following his spiritual master, and he did not deviate at all. And so we're going to see when we read what Bhakti Siddhanta said in a lecture, that he sounds exactly like how Prabhupada teaches, basically.
So I guess like we're seeing like these rebuttals to the point that Prabhupada disagreed about Saraswati Thakur. But I don't really know the context of why are people thinking he disagreed, what is like the statement.
Because they read something that Bhakti Siddhanta wrote and misinterpreted it and said, you know, sometimes they disagree.
Who and like what?
Yeah, that's just, I think somebody, I don't know the reference. I'm not sure the reference. It takes a little research, but I think someone somewhere, when I spoke to someone, was, oh, we can see in the past that sometimes the acharyas disagree with each other.
Because like this is a rebuttal to an issue that's in ISKCON.
Yeah.
Like, what is the issue in ISKCON? Where is it? Where does it come from? Why do we need to combat it? So you're gonna say like, oh, someone said, but like, who is?
He wants to know what the statement is.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that they say that Srila Prabhupada disagreed with Bhakti Siddhanta?
Oh, we're gonna go to that.
Oh, I was going to
Yeah.
ask, like, I mean, even if he slightly did, it doesn't matter, because in the end, he still followed what his spiritual master said and did regardless.
Yeah, but he wouldn't, what, you know, the Prabhupada had explained that how he took up his spiritual master's order was this verse that he quoted, 241, Vyavasayatmika Buddhir, that one pointed determination. So for Prabhupada, oh, sorry, I got my hands right in the screen. For Prabhupada, Prabhupada understood that you stick strictly to the orders of your spiritual master and you don't deviate from it. So it's a testament to his character, his own devotion, and to his success. It was based on that. So Prabhupada, I don't think if he disagreed with his spiritual master, would be getting on a ship at his age and coming to America. You know, he would be, you know, and I don't think he would be successful either. So this is his claim to fame, his claim to success, was that he just following the orders of his spiritual master and following his instructions. Okay, so Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So they displayed, so they are in agreement. Bhakti Siddhanta gave a lecture in India called The Brahmin and the Vaishnava, and there's a transcript of it. So I looked at that transcript and he uses the word constitutional at least 25 times. He uses the word constitutional, sounds very much like Prabhupada. And so the definition of constitutional, belonging to or inherent in the character or makeup of a person's body or mind. So there you go. Constitutional means constitutionally we are servants of Krishna. So bhakti is our constitutional position. That means bhakti is inherent, because that's what constitutional means. It means inherent. So I wrote the synonyms here: inherent, intrinsic, innate, fundamental, inborn, built in. There's no way around it. That's what constitutional means. And then he explains how we fell from the spiritual world. So I'm going to show you the quotes that made some people think that they disagree, but I've heard Jiva Goswami quoted the most, but I was also sent this quote. Okay. So this is kind of this top section, I think is what they quote. Before acquiring material designations, the living entity is supremely pure. Even though he is not engaged in serving the Supreme Lord, he remains situated in the neutral position of Shanta Rasa due to his marginal nature. That's where they kind of extract that and say, oh, you see, he's not engaged in serving the Supreme Lord. He was spiritual, but he wasn't engaged in serving the Supreme Lord, right? So they extract that, and that's how they understand, oh, just see, Prabhupada disagreed with Bhakti Siddhanta, but it's okay. It's okay they disagreed. Different people have different philosophies. Okay, so then he goes on, though the living entity born from the marginal potency does not at that time exhibit a taste for serving the Lord due to a lack of knowledge of self-realization, his direct propensity of serving the Supreme Lord nevertheless remains within him in a dormant state, right? So it's there, but there's a moment where he's not acknowledging it. He's not exhibiting the taste. Though the indirect propensity of material enjoyment, which is contrary to the service of the Lord, is not found in him at that time, indifference to the service of Hari and the seed of material enjoyment, which follows that state of indifference, are nevertheless present within him. So it's not that immediately the soul hates the service of the Lord. It's in there because the soul is marginal, but it hasn't come out yet. He becomes indifferent. He doesn't hate it. It just becomes indifferent.
Even the Shantaras thing, so it's saying that it's kind of like, it's describing the situation right before he gets material
Right.
designations.
Right.
So it's kind of almost like, it's almost like a given that in the spiritual world, they're all serving Krishna, having a great time serving Krishna. And then this little bit of like thing in the consciousness develops. And then you can, and then they become in Shantaras, where they're not actively serving, but they're just kind of observing. So it's kind of like, you gets fired up devotee in kirtan, singing, dancing, playing kartals, and really into it. And then something happens in the person's consciousness, and then the next time there's a big kirtan,
They step to the
they're
side.
just kind of like in the back, shuffling their feet a little, kind of watching everybody else.
Right. Right.
That's the situation.
Yeah.
But that's all happening in the spiritual world.
Yeah, so he's saying in the next sentence, he says, the living entity who belongs to the marginal potency cannot remain indifferent forever by subduing both devotional and non-devotional propensities. In other words, he's got to choose.
Right. You can't be in the spiritual
You
world.
can't be in the
and
spiritual world and just be indifferent. So you can't be indifferent to the Lord's service, but not really want the material world. You've got to pick one or the other. That's what it means to be marginal. He therefore contemplates unconstitutional activities from his marginal position. So again, it's not a geographical location. It just means that the living entity can choose one or the other. As a sleeping person dreams that he is active in the physical world without actually being involved in activities, when the dormant, indifferent living entity of the marginal potency exhibits even a little apathy to the service of the Supreme Lord, how can he exhibit that if he's not already doing it? And situates himself in a neutral, unchanging condition for even a little time, he is infected by impersonalism. So it's basically, he's explaining that you're serving the Lord, there's a little bit of apathy, and you're neutral for a little while, and then you've got to pick, and you get infected by impersonalism. That is why the conditioned soul desires to merge in the impersonal Brahman, thus exhibiting his mind's fickle nature. But due to neglecting the eternal service of the Lord and thereby developing the quality of aversion to the Lord, he cannot remain fixed in that position. In this way, aversion to the Lord breaks his concentration of mind and establishes him as the master of this world of enjoyment. So this is the
quote that they sent.
This is the quote that,
Called proving that we didn't
yeah,
fall down.
yeah.
It just describes so nicely
exactly
every
how we
single
fell
step of
down,
our
yeah.
fall down.
Yeah. And so that's my point, is that to claim that everybody disagreed may just simply mean that because you jumped over everyone's head, you actually misunderstood the whole thing. And you're making claims based on that misunderstanding. So someone steps up and says, I know better than Prabhupada. I've read Jiva Goswami and he says this, and Prabhupada doesn't say that. And Jiva Goswami is saying something different according to my understanding. And so they didn't, my conclusion is that they didn't agree.
But it's usually, I mean, the crucial clause there is according to my understanding.
Yeah, exactly,
So
yeah.
according to your understanding, they didn't agree, but you have to question your understanding.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the hermeneutical principles, right?
Right, your qualification. The first thing we do is look at ourselves and ask, what is my qualification to understand any of this?
Yeah.
And
And
the other hermeneutical principle is that we understand knowledge comes through parampara. So we're just going against, when we go against the principles that Shastra specifies for understanding Shastra, we're not gonna be able to.
we're not going to understand Shastra, right? Mm-hmm.
I heard this word from hermeneutical, what's that mean?
Hermeneutical, it's a whole science that's kind of like rules of the game for interpreting, understanding, and explaining Shastra texts.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That was last Sunday's course.
Oh, cool.
That's why we put that one first, so that people can understand how we start, why we go through this whole system of understanding text in this way. And not just taking things out of context and not ignoring what the acharyas say and trying to jump over them and.
Can I get if you record the, can I get about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Only the first part. unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the point is here, like, if you're not, like, someone doesn't want to play the rules of the game, and they can't win. You can't win when you break the rules, because as soon as you break the rules,
You
you're
foul.
you're
Yeah.
disqualified.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, hermeneutics sets kind of like the boundaries. So if you, the boundaries and the rules of the game, if you're playing tennis and the ball is within the bounds and you're following all the rules, then you can win. Okay, as soon as you get the ball out of bounds and someone says out, no, it's not. It was, like, then it's like, all right, get out of here.
Yeah, get out of here. Yeah, so then you can see that, again, things were taken out of context, because what they think is, we were born in the Brahmajyoti, or we were born, because he says the born from the marginal potency, we were born in the Tatashta Shakti or the Tatashta Lakshana, we were born there. But they forgot that that's not a location, and it's a figure of speech that Bhaktisiddhanta is using. You can see over and over again how he talks about we were serving the Lord and then we became indifferent to it. So I thought this was a great explanation, actually. I was very happy to come across
Cool.
it. Yeah, it was,
It'd be nice to do like 1, 2, 3, like really.
yeah. Okay, bless you. Okay, so use of the word constitutional, just different places that Bhaktisiddhanta in that paper used constitutional. Although the eternal living entity is constitutionally favorably inclined towards the Supreme Lord, due to his indifference towards the eternal service of the Lord, he is eligible for being controlled by Maya. That's a good summary of what he just explained. And that's again why you put everything in context. They take one or two sentences, send it as a quote, and then get confused. He develops a taste for receiving the mercy of a great liberated personality who is pure, eternally engaged in service, self-realized, and the only shelter for living entities, and then his lost Krishna consciousness is revived. Okay, so constitutional is not in that one, but
No, but the
it's
word.
talking about it.
Lost
Yeah.
means you had it
Yeah,
before and you lost it, and revived means you're bringing back something
Right.
that you already have.
his cultivation begins with endeavoring for self-realization, reviving his lost propensity of service, and ultimately being reestablished as a servant of the Lord. Every living entity is constitutionally a servant of Krishna. I mean, that sentence alone shows that 100% Bhaktisiddhanta and Prabhupada agree. Or Harijana. The living entity is bound by the ropes of Maya in proportion to his forgetfulness of his identity as the servant of Krishna. So how bound we are is how much we forgot that we're a servant of Krishna. That means we were a servant of Krishna.
Which means that this whole philosophy that we were never servants of Krishna before, it's actually just a lot of Maya.
Yeah.
Cause it's never that we're not a servant.
Right,
of
right,
Krishna, we're
right,
always
right.
a servant.
Yeah,
It's
wow, that's another good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maya.
Wow,
This way.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, that one. I might have that quote as, hey, what the heck happened? Was that the end? Oh. Wow. Okay, I thought okay, hold on. Oh, how do I stop the share? I can't believe okay, I know how to do it. I
The
did.
red, see the red thing? There's a red thing that says stop share.
Doesn't have enough stuff.
Yeah, I don't have the mouse.
Oh, promise, how did you do it before?
I
You
can't
did
remember.
it on your top bar.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Guten. Oh, no, come on. Okay. All right, so are you guys still able to see my screen?
We can see you.
You
No
can-
screen.
You're not sharing anymore.
Oh, so nice. How do I look? Okay,
Very
so we're, I don't want to look cute. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is. Oh, but you guys can see. I don't want you guys to
So
see me
small.
scrolling through my notes and such things. I
Just
was gonna read,
Unplug the monitor.
I was gonna read something. No, I think that was everything. Oh, yeah, the letter earlier from Prabhupada. I guess what we'll do now. Is have a discussion. We have 20 minutes left. It's kind of. I guess in summary, you can see, oh, actually, let me bring you guys back up. In summary, you can see that there's overwhelming evidence to the contrary of these claims being made. And there's overwhelming evidence that Prabhupada had a very clear message for us about where we originated and how we need to go back there and that we are servants of Krishna. And so we could go on and on and on for hours with this evidence, but I wanted to just give, just touch on a few of their arguments and then what some counter arguments are, but there could be so much more discussion. I mean, every time I think about it, that's why I was just up so late last night, just adding more and more stuff, because the more you think about it, the more you realize how perfect Krishna is. You realize how perfect Prabhupada's books were. You realize how we actually do have a loving relationship with Krishna and how, because I was speaking to someone at one time and he said basically that he really wants to believe we came from the spiritual world, but he's very bewildered by these other, what sounds to him like very rational arguments. And so one of the arguments that he said they gave was that it's just inconceivable. We started in the Brahma Jyoti, and when I raised the point that we don't start anywhere because we're eternal, he said time is inconceivable. Not really. It's not that inconceivable. There's no beginning and no end. It's pretty simple. And so I was telling him that usually when a philosophy is inconceivable and very difficult to explain, that sounds a lot like Mayavadi philosophy, right? Because they get to a point where they say words can't explain it, it's inconceivable, and everyone's thoroughly confused, but they just accept it because there's something they like about it. It's emotional. And when you think of the straightforward explanation that Prabhupada gave, it's not confusing. It's very simple. We're servants of Krishna. We're in the spiritual world. And for a brief moment, we have an experience because we decided to try it out for ourselves. And we have a brief experience and then we're back to our service. It's such a simple, straightforward, kind of speaks to the heart way of understanding reality. We always exist. We always exist. We always exist as servants of the Lord. We don't move around to different times and places. We just have an experience that's like a dream. So I was thinking that when we choose to go to the spiritual world, to the material world, it's not a rational decision. And that's maybe why some people wonder, how could I have possibly chosen to come here? So it's not rational, right? To say, oh, I'd rather go to that place where people die. That's not a rational choice to decide to go to a world where people are being killed and tortured and there's wars and you have to go through lifetime, many births, and you have to suffer birth, death, old age, and disease. It's not a rational choice. And the only other option besides rational is emotional. And the emotion that you use to choose to come to the material world is envy. So it's an emotional choice. You come to the point where you may envy Krishna, or as Prabhupada says, hate the service of the Lord. And so you don't make a rational choice. You don't look at that place and go, oh, that place looks better. You make an emotional choice. And emotional choices usually aren't rational. Actually, I don't think they ever are. Because you could see the pure love of the gopis is not rational, right? They don't act on ration. They act on love. And their love is that when Krishna's out there playing his flute, they only make up half their face and they go running out the door. It's not like, oh, okay, well, Krishna's there. I guess I'll get my stuff together and I'll head out the door. It's just like, I have to run right now. I don't care what I look like. I don't care if I'm abandoning all of society. I don't care if I'll get kicked out of my house. It's not a rational decision. It's an emotional decision. But in that case, it's a pure emotion. And so our choice to come to the material world is not a rational emotion and not a rational choice. It's based on, yeah, it's not a pure emotion. It's an envious emotion. And so that's how we choose to come here. Anyways, okay, I'm going to open it up now for anybody's points or questions. I'll come to you in a second. Let me see if anyone in Zoom land says anything. Vatsala has her hand raised.
Yes. Well, I have another controversial statement that I don't know the answer of.
Yeah.
Not recently, last semester, ladies in the ladies ashram here in Bhakti Academy, they asked me this question and I was able to explain, but not so much. And at the same time, I'm not very comfortable in discussing it in details, but I can give you an example, like a hint, maybe you would know this. So Prabhupada made a statement on a morning walk, and he said that like women, they like it sometimes and they willingly like it, and that is the psychology. He also gave an example that a certain incident happened in Calcutta and the lawyer was very intelligent. He some way or the other made a woman admit that she enjoyed. So basically someone might have just edited that part of that audio and uploaded it on YouTube, and it just went viral. And all week, everyone can hear is that that Prabhupada says that women, they like this activity.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you're aware of this.
Yeah, I am. Let me,
Yeah.
I'm willing to answer that. I just want to stick to the subject right now and see
Okay.
if anybody has questions about what we just discussed. And then if we have time, I can address that here, or I can address it to maybe the Nitai core group
Sure.
on
Okay.
WhatsApp if we run out of time. But I'll
Okay.
definitely, I know what you're referring to.
Okay.
Okay, so Rasa has her hand raised.
So I also had just a comment, or like, I'm not sure if you mentioned another controversial group, but it seems that now maybe it's more newer than these things that you are listing here are like, they have been around since like 80s or something like that. But like Ritviks and like different Gaudiya Math people and like that, you know, they've been around for longer. But at least where I'm coming from in the Nordic countries, I saw, like, especially during the pandemic time, there was a rise of like right wing devotee groups.
Yeah.
And I was just I'm not talking about traditional or liberal approaches or moods in Krishna consciousness, but actually like right wing, like Nazi, almost like admiring groups. And I don't know if that's a thing here, but I was really confused in the beginning because they were like, there was like in our temples there was some, you know, like I would say like senior devotees who kind of got into that, and it, you know, I don't know, it was confusing. So I was like almost thinking like, how could all these things like could somehow be like part of like a disciple course or something like that, because I feel like these controversial groups are always like either like you don't question like you don't talk about these things because they're so confusing, or people don't know how to answer.
Right.
And yeah, just like that point was like I felt like no one was so aware of it that they could realize like, hey, that's not like bona fide, or it's not something that Prabhupada thought. I know that there's one devotee who makes these books from Prabhupada books and
Oh, Rainy Tai, yeah,
promoting
yeah.
that kind of philosophy, but yeah,
Aryanism.
yeah, Aryanism.
he's,
So I don't know if you want to say something about that, or like something similar that are like more newer, or you know, like how to recognize, I guess, things.
Yeah, I mean, there's devotional service in different modes, actually. So we have the tendency to think that if someone has a bead bag and a dhoti or whatever, and they're in the ISKCON movement, that they're all operating on the same level of advancement or same platform, or they're all practicing exactly according to Prabhupada's instructions. But all types of people come to the movement, and they have all types of philosophies, and they have all types of psychologies. And sometimes there are psychologies. So it's like Rainy Tai, he's been arrested for assaulting devotees, and there's just something, he's practically a Mayavadi. The About Me page, Prabhupada Priya and I were looking at it on his website, was like, I am the supreme acharya. No one is more supreme than I am. Everyone should worship me. It was like really, really mentally off. And so, and from that platform, he's preaching these different things, and he has issues where in LA, he attacked a devotee and beat him up, and then he got arrested and went to jail. So you have that out there. And so like you said, yeah, we need to recognize that, not all people wearing dhotis are in proper state of consciousness or practicing properly. So we really have to bounce everything off of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. If they're saying something that doesn't sound right. And even again, going back to the hermeneutical principles, people can extract all sorts of statements from Prabhupada out of context and put it in a book. And that seems to be his favorite pastime, is that he extracts all these statements, he puts them in a book, and they're the most controversial things taken out of context, misunderstood, and then used as proof that we should, put people down and oppress them and abuse them. It's just the lens he's looking at the world through, and he's just finding quotes here and there to support that. So that's a good point. Yeah, there's all sorts of mentalities out there. All sorts of modes through which people are practicing devotional service, if they're even practicing. Some people just want to be part of a society and kind of lord it over. Okay, Arjuna?
Thinking during this class, like, this is like a leadership course, and how do we practically apply all this philosophy? And so I'm guessing like there would be like a bhakta who would come to us and say, oh, I heard this.
Right, exactly.
So I'm guessing what would be like the course of action? Is this like to prepare us to
talk them through it? It's to talk them through it, to reestablish them in Prabhupada's books and his philosophy, and understand that Prabhupada is the person we go to for our spiritual guidance, and then our gurus who are his disciples, and that we stick with that and not try to jump over Prabhupada, and to also understand that it is important to some extent. Prabhupada said that we shouldn't waste so much time trying to figure out why or when we came here, but just try to go back to Godhead. But we also do have to admit that we chose to come here. We have to do that.
Yeah,
And so, and that,
if you're not repentant, you basically can't go back.
right, if you're not repentant, so we have to understand that it was our choice. And so it's to help devotees who may start to become bewildered by that and not sure what to do, is to be prepared to talk them through it. And we've had, Prabhupada Priya and I both have had loads of conversations with students who used to live here, who came across that philosophy and were so bewildered and didn't know what to think. And just after a lot of discussion, it's like, okay, that makes sense. So just helping people. It's not to argue with the people who believe it. They're not going to listen.
Yeah.
They're set in their ways.
The main thing is so you don't become confused or bewildered, and so that you can help innocent devotees to have the proper understanding.
Yes, Arjuna.
Oh, so we can see that sometimes like younger and newer devotees, they like get these theories or these philosophies or these misconceptions. And they really just like hold on tight to them. Like I knew this devotee and he was like, he had this experience on like psychedelics or something like that. He merged. And it's like, how do we deal with devotees who are like kind of, we're helping them in like a leadership position, but they're like they somehow get attached either emotionally
Right.
or philosophically
Yeah.
to these points. And they're just like, oh, I experienced that. I felt
Right,
that."
right. You give them a higher experience, glubjamins. Just keep feeding them glubjamins. And eventually be like, how do you make these? And then they'll start serving Krishna. And then they mostly, if it's based on an experience, they just have to have better experiences. You have to just engage them in something that is really enjoyable for them. While at the same time, they learn that humility of doing the needful. You know, you want to have a balanced engagement that people learn to do the needful in some humble service. And then they're also engaged according to their propensity. Because sometimes people just jump straight to their propensity and then think they're up way up here. They're, you know, like an intellectual, for example, who refuses to do anything that's not sitting on the Vyasasana giving a lecture. You know, they won't wash pots, they won't even pick up a freaking broom. They won't do, it's like, can you help me? It's like, no, I give class, you know, they don't last long. So you have to, yes, okay, if you like to give class, we'll engage you accordingly. Let's start with washing a few pots. Let's start with just helping out when needed. And then we can have discussions on the philosophy. And so you want to just engage them in a variety of services and just get them having a different experience, bring them to kirtan, let them chant. And they may, once someone's convinced, there's not really much more you can say. At that point, you just engage them. If they're actually asking you, I had this experience, I'm not sure it's real, what do you think? Then you can talk to them. If they say, I had this experience, don't tell me otherwise. Okay, let's go eat some glubjamins. That's it.
So
You
it
know?
reminds me what Prabhupada said when there was that girl that came and said, "Oh, but when I chant,
I see a red light.
colored lights in my head." He's like, just keep chanting, it'll go.
Yeah, it'll go
away."
away.
So
She thought it was,
it's like hallucinations.
Yeah.
You know, so-called experiences,
yeah,
you know, and then just keep chanting, you know, you don't have to tell them, you're just like, not just positively engage them in chanting and serving. Gradually it will go away, they'll.
yeah. And as long as they maintain good etiquette, if they start thinking they're above everyone else, then that has to be dealt with. Yes, Arjuna.
So how do you, like these people who are attached to these like things or like these different philosophies or like spirits talk to them or the deities told them to do this, you know, or they're attached to like humor. How do we kind of like do damage control? So that the
No.
whole ashram doesn't think that we fell from the Brahmagoti.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everyone is now just like trying to see their past lives. Everyone's trying to do this stuff.
You can have a class on it, and just to have a discussion with them and not let that person take over and be the authority. That's where you have to come in and say, this is what we teach here. And this is gonna be a problem if you keep teaching otherwise. It's gonna be a problem. And so we're gonna have to talk about this. We were discussing, somehow it came up when we were in the DC temple. We were having a discussion and I can't remember how the fall of the jiva came up. But someone said something about not falling from the spiritual world. And this one devotee who lived there, she goes, what? She's like, what? I thought we did. And then this other visiting devotee said, no, so-and-so said we didn't, and he's an ISKCON guru. And he started trying to preach it. And I was like, look, we're in an ISKCON temple. The official ISKCON stance is that we did. So that's what we're going to talk about here. We're not going to talk about that we didn't. It's not up for debate. And he stopped. You know, that was the end of he didn't try to convince anymore. He just stopped. So sometimes you have to establish, in this ashram, this is what we teach. And we don't teach otherwise. And so you may teach that class to the students there. And if that person keeps trying to push something else, then you have to ask, you know, maybe why are they there? Are they there to practice Krishna consciousness according to Prabhupada's instructions, or are they there to be the teacher of everybody? You know, you can't keep someone around at the expense of everybody else. That's a really important point. If someone is bewildering everybody and won't listen to authority and has, you know, doesn't have a great attitude, you can't keep them around at the expense of everyone else. It can't be, well, we're trying our hardest to keep this person in Krishna consciousness and everyone else will fall away, but, and then that person leaves anyways because they were never interested to begin with to follow, you know, the proper authorities.
Yeah, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada talks about that. He says that, I mean, he has that term, right, Kali Chela. He says there's that the Kali or minor, whatever you want to call it, will sometimes send agents into the association of devotees that look like devotees, that act like devotees, but they're actually like, they have, their motive is to disturb the faith of the devotees by philosophies.
Yeah.
There's a Bengali term for it, Kali Chela, it's people that look like devotees, but they're actually agents of Kali.
Yeah. I don't know why, maybe because Washington DC is full of politicians that
I mean, we
there's
had
so
that
much
experience in
politics.
DC. It's funny because you said
So
I'm
much
traveling
politics.
next time to DC, and that same verse came up, that Jan Vijay quote, and then
Right.
there was one boy there. He's actually from here. I took the one that he's like, see, you know, he started harping on it, like harping.
Somebody in DC who was part of one of the other groups that I talked about was on a mission to put down ISKCON gurus. She would come to our ISKCON Sunday feast. She was on a mission to put down ISKCON gurus and teach that we didn't fall from the spiritual world. And so she like crashed a baby shower or something. Just so, and on the way there, she was like, this is what I'm gonna do. She told someone who was friends with her, but was like, yeah, and she was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. First, I'm gonna do this, and this is how I'm gonna get them. And she walks in the door and starts criticizing one of the gurus, and everyone instantly was like, what the heck is going on? And felt so uncomfortable. But that was her mission. She wasn't going there to support the person who was whatever kind of gathering it was, yeah, or whatever it was. She wasn't there for that. She wasn't there for the association of devotees. She was there to push her thing and bewilder people and put down their guru. And people in the room were disciples of that guru. And it's just, so yeah, it's true. It's just because she's wearing a sari doesn't mean that, you know, she's there for the right reasons. So that's something to figure out. What's that?
You have time.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says like, you know, when you come there to me, you know,
Right.
that's why you have to take.
Yeah.
There's there is no lights coming and sun and anybody will go there and everything.
Yeah.
So this discussion comes up and from your discussion, I felt like, we have experienced material world and we go back and then we never come back.
Right.
Yeah, he says,
So-
Unar Janma Vidite. You want to do it again. You do it once, you learn your lesson,
And then you won't do it again. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So you make that choice, you see it's a mistake, and you never make that mistake again. And so he's basically guaranteeing that once you come back here, because otherwise it would just say, when you finally come to this place you've never been before, you know, when you finally come here, you won't. But he's saying when you come back, you left here, and then when you come back here, that's the last time you're gonna leave. Because you've understood the experience. And Prabhupada uses that example of sticking your hand in fire. You do it once, you're not gonna do it again. Unless you're really not a rational person.
But they still have, I mean, we all still have a free will after.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So we have free will to touch fire, but I don't know if anyone ever has stuck their hand in fire twice. I mean, maybe somebody has, but and they have the free will to do so, but you know, it's like the creature in Frankenstein. He just need to do it once. He stuck his hand in fire and realized, and that was like a creature. Oh, I know that's a fictional story, but the idea is still there. It's like someone wrote it because that's a life experience, is that when you stick your hand in fire, you don't do it again.
This discussion comes again and again. One girl is another there is a kind of purpose with even. Oh, you know, then why you fell down? Krishna says, you know, you never come, why you fell down? And then I always got it. You always have free will. And then even now, like in last discussion, I told them, okay, like, every moment you have to surrender to Krishna. And that's why you need to be service as a Jew. You need to be surrounded by devotees. As soon as we think that's it, it will be like, at that time, like, at that time will follow. So like I was telling her that you may still fall down. There's no guarantee that I will go back to God and I will fall down again.
Well, right now it's mixed. It's karma mishra. It's like we're mixed, we're in mixed devotional service. We're not at that point yet of prema. And it's described that when you get to prema, you don't fall down, but you could fall down from bhava because it's not completely pure yet. So on the way up, you could fall off a couple rungs of the ladder. But once you get to the top of the ladder and step on the roof, you're done. There's no chance of, you're not gonna get back on the ladder. You've made it to the top. And so when one gets to prema, that's it.
That's why the emotional aspect of bhakti is so important, because it's emotion, you know, it's all about, it's our irrational decision, which is based on emotions, negative emotions that brought us here. So on the very high platforms of bhakti, like bhava and prema, it's all about emotion.
Yeah,
It's like, you're not talking about like sadhana or waking up early.
right.
It's like intense emotion for Krishna. So when our emotions are going so intensely towards Krishna, then that's gonna just drive us to decide everything in favor of Krishna. You know, there's no question that you gotta like do anything that's gonna take you away from Krishna.
Yeah, and yeah, it describes, I don't know if you've, and Madhurya Kadambini, it describes the stages from right Shraddha to prema. And there is a point where you perform devotional service because you like the service, and then, or what is it, bhajans? I think they compare it to kirtan or bhajans, is like, you like it if it's nice. But then the next stage is you like it no matter what. Doesn't matter how bad it is. You like it because it's Krishna's name being sung. And so the idea is that it's no longer you trying to enjoy, it's just you having love for Krishna. And then it's described that at the stage of prema, Krishna reveals himself fully. His sight, the sound of his voice, his taste, his smell, everything is revealed at prema. And so up to that point, you're not fully 100% dedicated to Krishna, or you're not fully 100. So yeah, of course, you could fall down in those stages. That's the story of Jatavarta. He wasn't, Prabhupada said he was on the transcendental stage. He wasn't on the prema stage. That's why he could fall down. But he quickly got right back up to where
And
he
that also was
was.
emotional because his emotions were going
For the deer, yeah. Yeah, it was misplaced. And it's said that he stopped his daily spiritual practices, actually. So he just kind of put all his service into the deer. So yeah, you could definitely fall down on the way, but once you get back, you're not gonna stick your hand in fire again. Once you have fully realized how perfect your relationship is with Krishna, you're not gonna give it up, because there's no curiosity anymore. If you're in the spiritual world, you could have curiosity. I wonder what it's like to try to be the center, and then you try it. It's, oh, okay, that's what it's like. Forget it. You know, it didn't work. And so of course you're not gonna choose it again. So that's why Krishna says it. You're not gonna come back again, because you already learned.
What is this kind of people who go there and never come back? So they are like Nitya Bhatta, Nitya, any of those.
Nityabhata just means that you're in the material world and material consciousness until you get out of it and go into Nitya Siddha, Nitya Mukta. Yeah, then you're Nitya Siddha. You're always, as long as you're in the spiritual world, you're Nitya Siddha. You're always in liberated consciousness. When you come to the material world, you're always Nitya Bhata. Jeez, I'm getting dyslexic.
Nitya Bhata becomes Nitya Siddha.
Yeah,
And then, yeah, that's what I was saying, is that when you become Nitya Siddha, you realize that you were never actually Nitya Bhata. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
state of consciousness.
yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. No. Does someone else have a question? Anybody else online? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'll take that as anyways, if anybody wants the paper written by Ravina Prabhu, I wrote it in the WhatsApp chat about Narayan Maharaj and our relationship with him. Or if they want me to send these quotes or these slides, just send me a message on WhatsApp and I think Anyway, I think I'll email it to you. I'm not sure. I think I can send that paper on WhatsApp, maybe I'll try to send it to WhatsApp, actually, then everybody can have access if they want. And then we'll have the video also. Yeah.
So you're gonna address Vassal's point on the Vita Course show?
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Vatsal, it's after 1, and I want to liberate everybody. So what I can do, perhaps we can talk about it later. I don't know if everybody else is interested in hearing the answers. I'm trying to think of, maybe I could send a voice text if you all are interested. I could send a voice text to WhatsApp. Should I do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other points? And otherwise we're gonna sign off here. Where's the stop recording thing?
It's next to your remote thing.
See, if you go down, also there's.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, everybody, if no one else has any points or questions, we're gonna sign off here. And Tari Krishna, nice to see you all again.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Srila
jai.
Prabhupada. Yeah, Jai Hari. Yeah, happy
Well,
birthday.
thank you for the class.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, Hari Krishna. Okay, so I'm gonna stop recording.